Good evening, and welcome to the Co-Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist. I'm Ulrike McGregor, and I welcome everyone here in person and everyone who's joining us on the live stream for our fourth session on the reflections on Lent and the events of Easter through art. And I assume the bad weather and the rain doesn't help to bring people out here, so thank you for coming. Amelia will help us with the microphone tonight. So we are halfway through Lent, and for me now it's time to turn with tonight's three artworks and the works of art we reflect on in the following 2 weeks, entering into the time during Holy Week. It is the time when we commemorate Christ's final days, beginning with his triumphal entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, leading to his crucifixion on Good Friday and his resurrection on Easter Sunday. Our first work of art this evening, The Feast in the House of Levi, was painted by Paolo Veronese in 1573, during the time of the Counter-Reformation, which started with the Council of Trent in 1545. And there is an interesting story to be told later surrounding the creation of this particular painting. We will then reflect on our second painting, Christ Before Pilate, by the Hungarian artist Mihály Munkácsy, created in 1881. And our third work of art this evening is a full-size preparatory drawing, a so-called cartoon, for a stained glass window. Francis Spear, a prominent English stained glass artist and lithographer, created Christ Derided in 1942 during the Second World War. This third artwork stimulated my brief artistic introduction for this evening, exploring the creation of stained glass windows. Oh, okay. Amelia, can you see if you can? Okay. Okay, sorry about that one. It's a really old stained glass window from the 12th century. However, stained glass windows have been a feature of Christian art for over 1,000 years, with the origins tracing back to early medieval Christianity. The earliest stained glass windows were produced in monasteries and churches, monasteries and churches, and they served as both decorative elements and educational tools. In a time when the majority of the population was illiterate, stained glass provided a visual narrative of biblical stories, saints, and other sacred themes. The light shining through the colored glass would transform the interior of the church, symbolizing the presence of the divine and creating a mystical atmosphere. The oldest stained glass window in existence is in Augsburg Cathedral in Bavaria in Germany, and that was supposed to be displayed on the slide. Many of the techniques and processes involved in the creation of stained glass windows have remained fundamentally unchanged for hundreds of years. The realization of a window typically begins with a colored sketch, which is then developed into a full-size drawing known as a cartoon. The cartoon serves as a template for cutting glass pieces, applying color, and adding painted details. And on this slide, you can see the first steps in the creation of a full-size drawing with the colors and the details added. And the black outline will later represent the lead that holds the glass pieces together. And the artist will add the different colors in the designs. Glass pieces are selected for their appropriate color and texture. The glass is then cut to size, following the outline of the cartoon underneath. The precise shape of each piece of glass matches the cartoon exactly. Paint, which is used to add decorative elements, and the faces of the figures is made using powdered mixture of metallic oxides and ground glass. The paint is then applied using different tools and brushes, which create a variety of effects. So it's either just painted on and then brushed off, or this brush helps to just create a texture on the glass. In addition, the paint can be carefully scraped away with a needle to create further detail. The method to fabricate red and blue colored glass was already invented as early as 3500 BC in Mesopotamia and in Egypt. However, the production or the procedure to generate yellow and orange glass was not invented until the beginning of the 14th century. To create a yellow and orange colored glass, a silver compound called silver stain is painted on the back of the glass. And then all glass pieces are heated in a kiln, binding the paint or the silver stain to the glass. So this is the silver stain. The silver stain is where the term stained glass actually comes from. And so it produces kind of a yellowish, or some, depending on the concentration of the stain, kind of an orange color. Once all the glass pieces have been decorated and fired, they are assembled on top of the cartoon, and then strips of lead are cut to size and used to connect the pieces of glass. The lead is joined on both sides of the panel using soldering iron. So the individual pieces, and then the lead is added to the edges between the different pieces of glass. The individual pieces of glass now form one panel. To make the glass panel secure and also water resistant, glazing cement is scrubbed into the gaps between the glass and the lead. To help the cement to harden, a chalk mixture called whiting is spread over the panel. Excess cement and whiting are removed and the panel is left a few days to harden. So now the window has been finished and is ready for installation. And we can admire all the different details and effects and elements that the artist has added throughout the process. So they either added kind of a floral design here, the buttons on the sleeve. We've seen creating this texture for the headpiece. So these parts are all painted on top of the colored glass. In contrast to this long-established technique, I would like to briefly mention work by the American designer and decorator Louis Comfort Tiffany. His philosophy was to paint with glass. In most of his creation, he did not paint any details. but rather the modeling, texture, form, and design of his windows were created solely with the glass pieces themselves, using the full range of colored glass developed at Tiffany's studios. So all these details are within the pieces of glass. So when they created the glass, they would add metal oxides to create kind of variation in color, and they would have thousands and thousands of these pieces of glass. When then they would go through it, say, okay, this green and blue would fit perfectly for alongside the riverbank. The flowers, they're red pieces of glass. So it's a slightly different approach to creating stained glass windows. And I hope walking through the individual steps of the creation of artworks, such as the bronze sculpture last week and stained glass windows today, leads us to actually a greater appreciation of the beautiful artwork that surrounds us in our churches, but also in our daily lives. And now I would like to begin with the reflection of our 3 works of art. Our first work of art of this evening is the large, or very large, and busy painting, The Feast in the House of Levi, created by Paolo Veronese in 1573. I will now provide a brief overview of the life and work of Paolo Veronese, and you can follow along on the handout. Paolo Veronese, born in 1528 and died in 1588, was one of the 3 major Mannerist painters working in Venice during the late Renaissance, alongside Jacopo Bassano and Tintoretto. The artistic movement of Mannerism allowed Veronese to demonstrate his remarkable ability with color and large-scale compositions. While Europe was experiencing intense religious conflict during the Protestant Reformation, which began in 1517, really with Martin Luther, and then the Catholic response known as the Counter-Reformation, beginning with the Council of Trent in 1545. Veronese focused on grand decorative paintings that depicted Venetian society within religious settings. One of his most famous works is The Feast at the House of Levi. This monumental painting, measuring approximately 18 by 42 feet, was created for the dining hall of the Dominican monastery of Santi Giovanni e Paolo. It is considered one of the largest religious paintings produced during the Quinquecento, which refers to the 16th century in Italy, a pinnacle of the Renaissance. Originally, the painting was intended to represent the Last Supper of Jesus with his disciples. However, Veronese's interpretation caused controversy because he included numerous secular and seemingly inappropriate elements. And we can zoom into these in a few minutes. But amongst those were German soldiers, drunk, comic figures such as buffoons and short humans, or other lively details that distracted from the solemn religious subject. At the same time, important figures such as the Virgin Mary were absent, and the scene lacked a clear focus on the traditional Last Supper narrative. Because the painting appeared to violate the stricter artistic guidelines established during the Counter-Reformation, Veronese was summoned before a tribunal of the Roman Catholic Inquisition and accused of heresy. In his defense, he referred to the nude figures in the Last Judgment by Michelangelo, a president for artistic freedom. a precedent for artistic freedom. And I've mentioned that many times. I think many artists use that excuse for the things that they painted in their artworks. The Inquisition ordered Veronese to correct the painting. However, instead of repainting it, Veronese simply changed its title to Feast in the House of Levi, referencing another gospel story in which Jesus dines with tax collectors and sinners. This solution allowed the painting to remain unchanged while resolving the theological controversy. And as you consider tonight's first painting, I would like to quote from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, verses 31 and 32. And this is part of the reading of Jesus calls Levi, which we heard at the beginning of Lent. Jesus answered, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners to repentance." And now I would like to invite your comments and your questions or reflections on the painting. Yes, thank you.
Well, my first impressions are the movement. All of these figures are very dynamic. You know, none of them are just sitting statically. They're all leaning and moving. You can see them walking or leaning over something. Movement. Even the perspective, like of the arches, the perspective kind of gives a sense of movement, even of the setting. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Each of these is really a great figure. Each individual one is a really great figure. It's a good painting of a person in movement.
Right, yeah. So absolutely, there's a lot of, as you say, exactly, there's a lot of movement. And I can zoom in, so we have almost like a triptych, right, with the three arches. And in the middle of it is actually where we find the haloed Christ. But as you say, he's not sitting still or in a static way. He leans over to John. Peter is carving a piece of meat there. So it's full of movement and action.
Do you have a picture of one of the buffoons?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I keep mixing. So, there's kind of little people and people with funny hats. These are the drunk German soldiers in their outfits, and they even brought their weapons to the dinner. And then, so that's on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, again, we kind of see a draw-off, and then he's holding a parrot on his arm. And if we look into the distance, there's even a gentleman picking his teeth with a fork. So definitely Veronese added a lot of detail for, a banquet, what was going on, what people were doing while they were attending a dinner like that.
I can imagine why the Catholic Church was not happy with this painting being called the Last Supper, right. But I think it was brilliant of him to rename it so that he didn't have to repaint it. And I really like the buildings in the background and the teal color. I think it brings your eye to that also.
It is actually beautiful that he renamed it, because it's such an important part in the gospel reading, again coming back, that it was so important for Jesus to not hang out with only the right people, but with everyone, with the sinners, the tax collectors. And Levi I have to say, again, that's one thing I learned. Levi is believed to be Matthew, so the Apostle of Matthew. So in 3 of the Gospels, in Mark, Luke, and Matthew, the banquet is being described, and it's always called the banquet of Levi, except in the Gospel of Matthew, he refers to Matthew. And Matthew means the gift of God, which I thought is beautiful. So it might have that once it was Levi while he was a tax collector, but then once he joined Jesus Christ as a disciple, he changed his name to Matthew, to the gift of God. Kind of coming back. So do you agree with the Inquisition that the painting does not give reverence to the biblical event? Yeah.
I do.
However, it is engaging though too, right? You probably have to look a little bit harder to find Jesus in the painting. But he is the perfect center. So again, if we would draw lines on it, Jesus is the perfect center of the painting. In the architectural construction of the painting actually leads our eyes to Jesus, because the steps going up lead to the middle, lead to the table of the Last Supper. And then also, if you kind of the stonework on the floor actually kind of leads your eye also towards the table.
I'm kind of curious as to why the people in the picture are such a small part of it horizontally. You know, it's like 3/4 of this painting is above them.
Mm-hmm.
And is that just because he had to fill a space?
I think so, yeah. Because if you think this is 18 feet, even if they fill up a third of it, that's human size. I mean, it's 18, it's 6 feet. So I think he was just, I mean, at some point, he just needed to fill the upper part of the frame. And I was just kind of, is this, let me just adjust this a little bit. It seems it's not great. No, I guess it's as good as can. So the reason I chose this is because it was supposed to Last Supper, and as we are entering, as I mentioned, kind of into the Holy Week, that was the beginning of Christ's Passion. And if we just kind of focus on the center part where the Last Supper is depicted, so we have Jesus Christ with the halo, we have St. Peter and St. John, and this is Judas, who's kind of turning towards us. And he's always kind of depicted with slightly a darker skin color, kind of representing him as the sinner, the traitor. And he also seems uncomfortable. A little of his facial expression might make him uncomfortable.
I read it that he's in the shadow.
Oh, in the shadow, sure.
You know, the devil went into his heart and now he's dark, you know. That's how I read the...
Okay, yes. Yeah. And he quite often is depicted facing his back to us. I mean, so he's kind of usually often on the other side of the table than the other disciples. So again, setting him apart from everyone else.
Do you think by including so many people in this that he's trying to bring all of us into the Last Supper? You know, 'cause we're a strange bunch as well. And and all represented by characters there, so that rather than just the 12, that we are all at that supper.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the one reason why he did this. He brings all the sinners in, all of us, and we can choose who we are. So, well, when we look at who am I, right? Because we are all sinners and we are all part, and we should all take part with the Last Supper. And also, we have I have mentioned that before. We see this very often, particularly in paintings by the Renaissance, that the artist will set the biblical scenes in what is then a contemporary setting. So I think we see the 1573 spring fashion displayed right here, right? I mean, this gentleman, those were fashions, those were clothing that people would be wearing at that time. And thinking of Venice was such a metropolitan trading hub. They were trading with the Middle East, with the South, with the North, and so they were kind of the center of all the most beautiful things that were created, and they would all come there. So yeah, we see the spring fashion of 1573 depicted here. Yeah, so any other thoughts or anything you would like to have me zoom into? Excuse me?
Is Matthew represented in the painting?
I haven't come across it, no. I'm sure he is, because he was the host of the dinner, but no one has kind of pointed him out. I will end the reflection of this painting with the question, who am I amongst the sinners at the banquet in need of Christ's redemption? Our second work of art is the painting Christ Before Pilate by the Hungarian artist Mihály Munkácsy, created in 1881. And I will give a brief overview of the artist's life, and you can follow along on the handout. Mihály Munkácsy, born in 1844, was one of the most important Hungarian painters of the 19th century and gained international recognition for his dramatic, historical, and genre paintings. Born as Mihály Lip in the town of Munkács, he later adopted the name Munkácsy in reference to his birthplace. His early life was marked by hardship, including poverty and the loss of his parents. And he initially trained as a carpenter before turning to art. Munkácsy began his artistic studies in Hungary and later continued his training in major European art centers such as Vienna, Munich, and Paris. Paris eventually became the center of his career, where he developed a reputation for powerful compositions and emotionally intense scenes. His earliest success came with the painting The Last Day of the Condemned Man, created in 1869, which won a gold medal at the Paris Salon and brought him widespread recognition. Munkácsy became particularly known for his large-scale religious works. His most famous achievement is the Christ trilogy, which includes Christ Before Pilate, Golgotha, created in 1884, and Ecce Homo, created in 1896. These monumental paintings depict dramatic moments from the Passion of Christ and are admired for their theatric composition, realistic detail, and powerful emotional impact. The trilogy established Munkaci as one of the leading painters of religious historic scenes in the late 19th century. In addition to religious themes, Munkaci also produced genre scenes portraying everyday life, often focusing on peasants and rural communities. His dark color palette and strong use of light and shadow reflected the influence of realism and romanticism. Despite his great success and wealth, Munkaci's later years were overshadowed by illness and mental decline. He died in 1900, but his work remains highly respected in Hungarian cultural history and continues to be displayed in major museums across Europe and the United States. And now I would like to quote from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 22 and 23. Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." But he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" They only shouted the louder, "Let him be crucified." So this is also quite a large painting, so 13.7 by 21 feet. So we are into the larger works tonight. Any suggestions?
What struck me initially on this is the three figures in white that are so prominent in it. And I guess Pilate is usually depicted in white maybe, but it seems a little odd for somebody who's often seen as a villain too. Although in the reading today it's kind of, well, what did he do wrong? So maybe there's a little bit of that. But yeah, just that Jesus and Pilate, and then whomever that is on the far end of it,
Yes.
who looks outraged.
Yeah, perfect, like that.
It strikes me that Jesus looks calm and the rest of them look kind of just unhinged. And Pilate looks like he's contemplating, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yes, yeah, exactly, nice.
It looks like the governor is not paying any much attention to what's going on. It looks like he's looking at his cell phone, and it's like he doesn't want to be there, and he doesn't seem to be paying any attention to what's going on.
Yes, exactly. So, and I thought so exactly the same. So the three white figures are really kind of standing out, and I kind of cut the picture into three, so we can maybe start with this time on the far right. So yes, Pilate is wearing white as the righteous. However, he also has red on the rim, the edges of his, which kind of, again, he's trying to wash off the blood of his decision, but it's probably not quite working. So because we know he's guilty, he sent Jesus Christ to his death. So I thought that was a really interesting detail in the painting. And also, yes, as we all have seen, I mean, he would is kind of beam me up, Scotty. I mean, he would like to be somewhere else. He's not interested in it. And it would be today, it kind of looks someone on this phone. But he seems like counting his fingers, or he's probably thinking of something different. It's like, oh, I still need to do this judgment, and I need to get the money from this person. So he definitely is really trying to get himself out of this situation, but he can't. Just kind of interesting figures that are surrounding Pilate. This is believed to be Caiaphas, who was the high priest. After Jesus was taken in the gardens, that's where he was sent first. And then Caiaphas sent him to Herod, and Herod sent him to Pilate. So he's believed. And then also I thought this character was quite interesting. Yeah, he's very tall, and he has the look of a righteous person. He's also somewhat detached from the whole situation, but he's like, oh yeah, no, this is the right thing. I have figured this out. So I think he has a very condescending look on his face. So then going into the middle ground, and yes, Jesus is in pure white. And as Diane said, he's calm and he's collected. He kind of trusts in his Father, and he knows what is coming, and he goes through it. And then what's going on
Just
with these people?
On the prior one, the mother and child almost look out of place.
They look what?
They look out of place in this whole thing.
Yeah.
But she looks fairly calm.
Yeah, and also because if I remember right, this part was kind of going on during the night. So I was thinking the same. It's like, why would she be there? But then we knew that some of the women were following Christ, and they would stay with him. So she may or may not have been one of the women. Yeah, and then what are we making of these people? Yeah, again, it's just a crowd, right? So the Pharisees and the scribes were rabbling up or rousing up the people that were there and made them scream and demand the crucifixion of Christ. And I think, so these are the people that are just there. I mean, it's the crowd, and it's a little bit, I think, what the artist wanted to show is that how easily also a crowd can be stirred in one direction or another. Because probably some of them had been there with Jesus listening to his preaching, and were kind of contemplating what he was saying and maybe wanting to believe him, but then they were in this crowd and they were stirred up, and then they were probably also the ones who would be screaming for his crucifixion.
He almost looks like our modern day host of the talk radio show. It's looking to really get everybody riled up.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry, I keep doing this. He's also wearing white, but then again, he's also has red. His headpiece is in a red color. He has a kind of a scarf tied around his waist, which is red. Again, he has blood on his hands, being part of calling for Christ's crucifixion. And I thought this figure was very interesting as well. Kind of with the back to us, and it's the Roman soldiers, but we don't know who is it and what his facial expression is, how he thinks about it. So it's also the anonymity of a person, so not being recognized as participating in Christ's judgment.
One more, I promise. I'm struck by just the amazing detail of, even if you look at the city that's in the back window, how they've got that. I mean, he's got for as big a painting that is, to spend all that time to just get the detail of that is amazing. And the walls.
Yeah. And it's interesting if you think of when this was painted. So because we looked at paintings from the 15th century, and particularly the Netherlandish artists, they loved to paint those really, really tiny details. And we kind of looked at some work 2 weeks ago where we could see the window pane and the decoration of the stonework on the buildings in the far distance. Going forward, that these details kind of got lost, or that the artists weren't necessarily so much interested in painting the details, but the artist now kind of came back to that, because I thought he spent a lot of time and energy just painting the details in the carpet, which I thought was really interesting.
The interaction between Jesus and Pilate went on for 3 different occasions. You know, it was the back and forth. And one of those times he was tortured further. So this is one part of a 3-part play.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know, was this the last interaction or the first interaction? Or the second even? I mean,
Right. So I would say, because you pointed out that he was, in the meantime, was sent away for scourging, and we don't see any injuries on Jesus. So I think it's probably either probably the first interaction between Pilate and Christ. Yep. Yes. So yeah, and I think this is one of the pivotal moments also in. It's almost a point of no return, right? Because Pilate sentenced Christ to death, and from that point it goes forward. At this moment, history could have been changed if Pilate had made a different decision. So he had actually the power to set Jesus Christ free. Although that wasn't the plan. I mean, if we believe in the plan of God, who sent Jesus to earth to become human, and he needed to die on the cross to carry our sins. But yeah, Pilate he was the deciding factor in this story. So, yeah. Okay.
I'm intrigued by the facial expressions of Christ looking at Pilate. You know, again, Christ is very calm, almost like, I know what you have to do, Pilate, and Pilate is reluctantly admitting, I know this is what I have to do. And they are almost oblivious to everything else going around them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So I will leave this painting with the following question. Am I willing to stand with Christ, even when a crowd mocks or rejects him? Our third and last work of art of this evening is the full-size preparatory drawing by Francis Spear, created in 1942. And I will give a brief introduction to his life and accomplishments, and you can follow on the handout. Francis Spear was a prominent English stained glass artist and lithographer whose career spanned more than 5 decades. He was born in December 1902 in Norwood, South London. At the age of 18, he began studying at the Central School of Arts and Crafts, an institution founded with the ideals of the arts and crafts movement, associated with William Morris and John Ruskin. During his studies, Spear developed a strong interest in stained glass and produced early designs influenced by medieval and Gothic themes. In 1922, while still a student, Spear became a pupil assistant to the renowned stained glass artist Martin Travers. Working under Travers allowed him to gain valuable experience in ecclesiastical design and stained glass techniques. One of his earliest religious works was a stained glass panel titled Nativity. After graduating in 1923, he received a scholarship to study at the Royal College of Art. For his diploma project, he created a World War I memorial window for the Chapel of Warwick School in 1925. Spear later studied stained glass in France, visiting important medieval sites such as Chartres, Amiens, and Rouen. Alongside his artistic career, he taught lithography at the Royal College of Art and stained glass techniques at the Central School for many years. Throughout his career, Spear designed over 300 stained glass windows for more than 130 public buildings, including churches and cathedrals across Great Britain and South Africa. Many of his works explored Christian themes and wartime memorials. After completing his final window in 1970, he focused on printmaking until his death in 1979. For this work, I would like to quote from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 28 and 29. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, weaving a crown out of thorns. They placed it on his head, and a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." So, what do we see? Any colors? Or in comparison to what we have seen before? I think this is quite different.
Is Christ blindfolded in this?
Excuse me?
Is he blindfolded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have compared to the two other works of art, they were very, very busy, lots and lots of people. Now we kind of zoomed into the figure of Jesus Christ. He is all by himself. We have a frontal view. And yes, he's blindfolded. He wears the crown of thorns. The red robe is wrapped around him, and he holds a reed, which is kind of like a scepter, which is a symbol for royal authority. So again, the soldiers were mocking him and representing him as a king. His hands are tied together, crossed in front of him.
It looks, and the hands around in the four different diamonds there are interesting. I mean, they're very similar. I don't know if there's, the color has a specific meaning for each of the hands, but I think in the upper right-hand one, the blue hand is holding a stick. I can't see if the other ones have.
Yeah.
I guess maybe a snake or a rope in the lower left.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So even though Christ is isolated by himself, but the artist, so Francis Spear, used the hands to show us that the soldiers were mocking him, they were hurting him, but yeah, because we know in the gospel reading it says they were hitting him on the head. He went through the flagellation, so I think that's, and also just being aggressive against him, hurting him, And the way I think the artist portrays that is through, again, what we're saying with the soldier, not seeing his face or not seeing the people who hurt him. But it still happens. And quite often, I think particularly today in our time and with digital communication, we can hurt other people, but we're not necessarily, no one really not necessarily knows it was us. So it's kind of that idea of being, not being recognized, not being part of it, but actually doing it. So I thought that was interesting. But I would like to, so there's also 3 quotes included around the work of art. And on this side it says, "All they that see me laugh me to scorn." And it's from Psalms. On this side, "I was derision to all my people." And down here it says, "Hail, King of the Jew." And these 2 quotes are really kind of working together, again, kind of showing the taunting, the mockery, the contempt of as we hear in the gospel reading, certainly the Roman soldiers, but it's in some of the readings it also says it was some of the elders and the scribes which participated in the mockery of Jesus Christ. In that, just doing my research, it was interesting. So the psalm verse is actually part of George Friedrich Handel's Messiah. So he, in that piece of music, he also included the psalm saying. Just a kind of why I was, or the reason I knew about this artist is I do some work for the Mayo Clinic, and I was asked, since I was traveling to Europe, to look into this memorial stained glass window. So in 1929, the Mayo brothers commissioned a stained glass window for their father because William Worrell Mayo was born in Salford, which is outside of Manchester. And they were invited to to be part of the British Medical Association, the annual meeting. And as part of that kind of celebration, for them to come over to Europe. And that was the very first time that the 2 Mayo brothers traveled together. All throughout their professional life, they never traveled together. So one of them, Dr. William, would go and participate in a meeting or give a presentation, and then Dr. Charlie would stay in Rochester, or vice versa. So they never traveled together. However, in 1929, they were coming to the end of their career, and they both were invited to participate in this conference in Manchester, and that was the first time. And because it meant so much to them, because kind of going back to where their father was born, both receiving great honors in Manchester, and that was the very first time that they ever traveled together, and both of them left the Mayo Clinic at the same time. And it was interesting. So that was at the very beginning of Francis Spear's career. So it was 1925 is really when he graduated and did his first work. And so this was in 1929 when he was commissioned. Really, it's a large stained glass window to produce that for the Mayo brothers. But that's just kind of a side story for. So, any thoughts? And I don't know if this was ever turned into a stained glass. So, as I say, it's the preparatory sketch, but I haven't found any information if it actually was turned into a stained glass.
It just seems like another perfect example where Jesus just seems calm with knowing that he trusted God, his Father, and what is come and has already come. He just seems relaxed. And even when you enlarged it, his eyes are closed underneath the blindfold, so it's just almost like he's at peace with what's coming.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Yes, and I think those are wonderful closing words. Thank you. And I will end this evening with the question: does reflection on Christ's suffering remind me of my responsibility to lead a good life?